Hi, and welcome to the Crux Podcast. This is episode 1, and I'm Sam McHugh. So, what is the crux? It's actually a climbing term, but I found it very appropriate for business. It's the part of the route you're trying to finish, which is really the hardest part. Even if you've solved all the other pieces, you can't complete the journey if you don't figure out the crux. And I've always loved this metaphor in the startups and the other companies I've advised. So as a brief introduction, I've been in B2B sales and marketing for about 20 years. I've been at multiple startups at a variety of different stages. So really this podcast is an endeavor to share what I've learned and observed over that time, and hopefully for the benefit of the people listening here. A little bit more about me. I have specialties in lead generation, demand generation, sales enablement, marketing best practices, and so over the course of these podcasts, we'll go through various granular topics, concepts, all related to what makes up sales and marketing as we know it today. And finally, I'd like to give a thanks to Wayne Sadin and Christine Nielsen, two people who've recently given me that final shove to try something like this and to get some of my ideas out on sort of a virtual sharing platform. All right, so in business, the crux can come in many forms, and I'm going to take all these episodes and break down the various areas that they could be coming from. It could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be product, it could be technology such as automation tools, MarTech, sales tech, or it could be leadership. There are a lot of places, and there's going to be a lot of different topics that can come into this talk. But right now, today, I'm going to start with marketing. I feel like at the core, it is a truly tricky, deceptively tricky issue that people have with making their company get off the ground at various stages. And I like to talk about what I call the why. And when I mean why the heck should a customer care about your product? And I feel like people get so immersed in creating the product, working with it every day, getting some customers, trying to figure out making a sales goal for the end of the year. They don't constantly really break down why their product is important so that they can articulate that to people who have never heard of their product before. And this is an ongoing exercise, and you want to make sure you're doing exercises to make sure that why is there. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time scaling. So customers, I find, are so hesitant to change these days. The willingness to stick with the known evil or just okay is truly present. I feel people often feel they're one bad decision or one purchase away from being fired. The old saying, no one gets fired for buying IBM, is always true. So you really have to get into the value proposition of your product and find out why it's urgent and critical, and then find out for whom it's urgent and critical so you can have that voice and that targeting that's appropriate to really get over the hump of what a customer will find critical and important about your product. Just for the sake of the concept, we're really just talking about top of funnel right now. And in doing that, you're going to be digging into the solution and not necessarily yet digging into your product. You want to articulate to people that you understand their issue and the solutions that would come from that, and then talking about your product comes after that. But business needs often largely fall into cost, reliability, ease of use, security, integration. So all of these have a simple pain you should be able to probe, and then ultimately you'll get a chance to link your solution to it. So when I'm trying to do this either for myself or advising companies, there are a few exercises that I've found have been a productive way to get to it, because a lot of people go, okay, Sam, this makes sense, but how do I know I'm doing it right, or how do I know what to do if I'm up for doing it? So here are a couple exercises you can try and should try with your product frankly, on an ongoing basis. First exercise is I would pick a friend or colleague, someone sharp, has some business sense, but it doesn't really necessarily matter if they understand your product or your sector. And you should get them to give you time to let you describe the solution and your product and really get them to give their candid feedback. Do they understand it? Does it seem to make sense? Maybe all of a sudden you're hearing yourself pitch this to the person and you're feeling like, wow, I'm listening to myself and it really sounds convoluted. Sometimes that's a great first step to just understand, have I gotten too inside my own head? Do I really need to just kind of tear down my description of this and rebuild it? And another way to do that is actually I would take your best piece of content and see what that person or multiple people's honest reaction is to how engaged they were. I found, earlier this year I joined a new industry, and so I needed to do a lot of reading. And even though I needed to consume this content, I found very quickly with some pieces of content, after the first paragraph, I would just really have a hard time staying engaged or wondering where it's going. And it became obvious that the solution or why I should care about this product or this content piece from this company was not obvious. And that's a good sign that you really need to review your call of action and, again, the why, so that when people are willing to take a peek at your content or take a peek at your solution or listen to you or take a phone call from you, that you have the hook ready. Because whether it's 8 seconds or 30 seconds, it's going to be quick that you have to make sure that you've got their attention so you can get to the deeper discussions. Second exercise I would recommend is practice actually breaking down your value proposition or product description into the simplest terms. And sometimes people do this, but it never gets simple enough. Like, really either imagine that you're running across this person, in the middle of nowhere, or you're at a networking event, or you're trying to describe something to someone just to get them to be willing to take your call later. And if you've got that urgency to distill it into something that might only be 15 to 60 seconds, you really start to actually get down to a very powerful value proposition that is very, very stripped of anything that's vague. And if you can't do that, then it's really starts to have you, wonder what is your value proposition. But I find it a great exercise to sort of try to tie it back to the elevator pitch. And again, the whole idea is you're not shortchanging your product. You're trying to get someone interested so you can get to a longer meeting, like a 20-minute to 30-minute meeting, to really then get into the heart of again, why it matters and a lot more of the meat and potatoes of it. You also want to examine elements that might mislead someone about the value proposition. Are you saying things and then people are responding completely in a different manner than you expected them, and they're not understanding that your product does something or doesn't do something? I went to some of the MarTech events, and we all know that there's so many different vendors out there, and they're layered upon layered upon layered upon Salesforce. And I mean, in the know, I was at one person's booth, and I'm talking to this person, and I'm like, listen, it took me 4 guesses to figure out what you guys actually do, and I'm in the industry. So be very careful to have an understanding that the why of your product really aligns appropriately ultimately with what you ended up describing about your product. If you're in a demo, you can lose someone's attention very quickly if you don't align very appropriately with what they need and what you do. This can also end up helping with your target marketing and the ideal customer profile that you set up to optimize your time with. And again, finally, start with a question. think of questions that get to the why. Like if you're at a booth and people are passing by and you just want them to stop, what's a question you could ask? Is disaster recovery something you're struggling with? Or is your sales team having a hard time closing deals? These are all things that can start conversations and quickly get into the why of, okay, here's why we should talk, if you realize that there's reception there. So if you're doing these exercises, which I think are good to do, again, pretty consistently, if you can't find someone to be your sounding board, just give me a shout and I can help you do that.